Now I want to turn to the book. And I know that you have recently published a book describing the early education of African American pharmacists, covering the period from 1870 to 1975. What was the inspiration for this?
There's not much information, hardly any information published on African American pharmacists prior to, well, especially in post-Civil War, which was ended in 1865 in this country. There's not been any publications on African American pharmacists. So why is that? I don't know. It's either that it was just deliberately ignored, or people did not find it interesting, or they were not aware. I was not even aware that there were schools that were dedicated to training African American people. And during that time, they used the term Negro and colored, so the colored pharmacists. So I was not aware. I grew up in the South, where I think sometimes my perspective comes from that, because we were not taught certain things that I started learning long after I got older. And I wonder sometimes, why didn't I know that when I was younger? Well, those things were not taught. We didn't even know there were Black pharmacy schools.
Can I just stop you there? You said that there were Black pharmacy schools. So just to clarify, does that mean that there were separate pharmacy schools for Black people and white people?
That's correct. That's correct. No one told me that, so that's correct. You're absolutely correct. So that was what inspired me. I kept saying the same thing. My gosh, I didn't know that was the case. So then I got curious. I wanted to know more. So what started this was, I was really looking at a question that a student asked me at the school. She wanted to know, who was the first African-American female pharmacist in America? And I had no idea. Another baffling question. I had no idea. So I was so struck by the question and thought, what an incredible question. I wondered myself who it was. So I started looking and researching and trying to find that lady, who that lady may have been. And lo and behold, I found these Black pharmacy schools that started in around 1870. And then I said, oh, a little light goes off in my brain saying, that's probably where she would be. She must have come from one of those schools. So at that point, I launched this search trying to find those schools. I never intended to write the book on the school, but I spent so much time trying to find that one Black female pharmacist. And I was able to recover some records from some of those schools. There were a total of 7 schools that were formed after the Civil War between 1870 and 1927. And I didn't know that existed. 2 of those schools still exist today. That's Howard University and Xavier University in New Orleans. They still exist from that time period.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And has this segregation contributed to some of the healthcare disparities that you still see today?
It actually started after the Civil War, when they could not get treatment for the Black patients, Black people coming off of the slave plantation. So many of them started dying as soon as they got off the plantation, because they couldn't get health care. So that disparity is believed to have started then and continues to this day. The disease states that we see are different, but the disparities and I can see it in my clinic. We got almost all of our diabetic patients come in there are all Hispanic or from low income classes, just like it was back in the post-slavery days. So it's just that the disease state is different, but the disparities are still there. So I'm putting together a presentation now to talk about that. But that's what got me started with this project. I was looking for a woman who was the first to graduate as a pharmacist, and I discovered her. I actually found her, by the way. She was in my Harry Pharmaceutical College, and 1894 was when they had the first female graduate that had a pharmacy degree.
This is fascinating. It was obviously a prodigious amount of work. And right now, you know more about this topic than anybody else. But I'd like to ask you to stand back and say, what is the value of this work? What does it contribute?
A lot of medical history focuses on physicians, focused on scientists. It's focused on a number of, some cases, nurses, and it's focused on a number of scientists and healthcare providers, but none of it focuses on pharmacists, hardly any of it. So what this does, this adds a contribution to the literature, now with the focus on African American or Black pharmacists that didn't exist before. And I can say that pretty confidently because when I start looking for it, I can't find it. It's just not there in the history books. I work with the American Institute on the History of Pharmacy. They've been around for a long time. They've got all kinds of historical records, but they have none on African American pharmacists until now. So I donated my book to them just when it came out. So they got one reference now. But now in the last 2 years, they've started to publish articles through the American Institute on the History of Pharmacy on African American pharmacists. 2 major articles have come out since about 2017. And they're very well researched because they got real trained historians doing the work. And I'm just an amateur historian. And so they have put out 2 major, what I call flagship type articles looking at African American history. So I'm on the board now, and I'm going to try to encourage that they continue to do that because historically they have not had any publication. So this is one major contribution to the literature. Frankly, and I'm not bragging, it's just a fact that I'm the only one that has a book on it.
And I just want to clarify a point. You are a past president of the Association of Black Hospital Pharmacists, but we hear the term African American more often today. Is there a preferred term?
Our organization prefer to use the term Black, like Black American versus African American, although I use both. When I use both terms, I'm referring to the same people. Now, the contention with the use of African American oftentimes comes from Black patients or Black people who may be of mixed race, or they may be from different ancestral backgrounds that they don't consider to be African.